Now, if I want to bring him into a new background, I have to do a couple of different things. One, I'd have to load that background, so let me just import something. And let's import something on the desktop. Fantastic. So we're trying to promote some kind of spring break type thing where we're going to have Wolfie partying in front of all these kids. So I'm going to bring that in, hit scale to make it the right size. And like I said, it's kind of like the magenta solid. You definitely can tell that your mask isn't totally correct what's on top of the footage, which is really the only reason I brought this in right now. But if we were matching this, like if this was really the background we were going to add to that, just one other thing I want to throw out there as far as basic keying goes is that you can also add adjustment layers, which is something we haven't discussed before. Adjustment layers work the same way in After Effects that they do in Photoshop. So adjustment layers will affect everything beneath them. So if I add a new adjustment layer by going Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, it rests on top of everything else, and whatever I do to that, it will affect all the layers underneath. So for example, there's a really simple one called Color Balance, which kind of takes care of a lot of different things at once. So I can drag that onto my adjustment layer, and then anything I do to this will affect the layers underneath it.
Where'd you get the adjustment layer?
The adjustment layer I got from going Layer, New, Adjustment Layer.
Okay.
And then I found the one that I wanted just by typing it in. I knew I wanted Color Balance, but there's tons of them. In fact, anything under color correction you could apply theoretically to an adjustment layer, and it will apply it to everything underneath it. So you can do hue and saturation, curves, layers. It's just a nice way of making your footage match. So I could change the balance of reds, greens. Just remember your color wheel. If you add more blue, for example, it's going to take away yellow. Okay, and green and magenta are opposite. So you just have to remember things like that. I could get rid of some of that green that's in there. So even if I wasn't using this background image that I'm trying to match it to, if I just wanted to get rid of some of that red tone in his fur, I could change the red balance and the green and just kind of tweak this to something I'm more comfortable with. And just make him kind of a cooler color. And the best thing about an adjustment layer is you can just toggle it on and off and see the effect. And if you thought it was too intense, you could always just lower the opacity of it as well. You've got tons of options if you start using layers, specifically the adjustment layers. Now, I had just done key light. I'm going to do another example just as review. So I'm going to go back to my project window, and I'm going to make a new composition. And this time I'm going to bring in this throw to, which I think is extremely similar. It's a little shorter, happens a little faster this time. And one other thing I can do is notice that this footage isn't as long as the composition. I can actually make my work area go to that end right there, and then just say composition, trim comp to work area. That's a really fast way of making your comp the same size as whatever your work area is, which is that gray bar with the yellow handles on it. Now, the way I showed it to you the last time, because I was talking about keying, I started with that, but I usually do that garbage matte first, actually, just because it gives me a better idea of what I'm keying. It's just like in Photoshop where you'd want to hide anything when you're doing color correction that will affect the color balance. Because I'm going to be removing a lot of these colors, I would actually want to key him first, or to actually add the garbage mask first. So I'm just going to do that quick at the end. And that will give me more control as far as changing the color later, because there'll be less to work with. But then I'm just going to extend this a little. Now, even with this, there's a couple of automatic ways I can do this that will build up to, but I just wanted to review the importance of being able to do a really simple garbage matte like this, because you know, if you're not using a fancy studio like we have and you just have a piece of green paper or cloth or something, it's important to know how you can get rid of your living room or whatever from the shot. So this will morph from this to the other one if I chose to animate it. And so I'll go to the end and grab the little points. I could actually just resize this one too. So if it was something like that was just a shape, it'd be really easy to do this. But people, you gotta take a little more time. Or people in animal costumes. So I could fix that, but you could see that over time that will change and grow. I'm going to actually turn that off for now and just zoom in on the footage again. I deleted it. I could also just hide it. But I wanted to show you a couple of other ways of keying. So I've already shown you Keylight, which is probably the first one I would go to. There's quite a few other ones as well. Extract is excellent for black and white imagery. It's very much like the Magic Wand tool in Photoshop. You could try using it here, but there's really just a black point and white point. So it would work well if you had somebody against a white background, because you can see it looks at the value, not the color, and that green is about the same tone as half the fur. So Extract is great for like a black and white image or something that has white and black backgrounds, but for green, it's not the greatest. For everything else, it's awesome. Keylight is usually what I use, but the other really great one is Color Difference Key. If you use Color Difference Key, usually I start with Keylight, and if that doesn't work, I do Color Difference Key, since each piece of footage is pretty different. And here I'm just going to go Effect Keying, Color Difference Key, and it gives you pretty much many of the same options, but you can eyedropper the green, and then it's really just a matter of tweaking those settings to get them to be where you want. Now, there's some other options here that weren't in Keylight. I'm going to reset this by clicking Reset at the top. One thing that you can do is notice that there's little eyedroppers like there is in Photoshop. One deems like the main color, and then you can add and subtract to that color. So the other way that you can key is by using these colors pickers off to the side. And what you might notice this doing is you've got the original footage on the left, and on the right, within this palette, you've got this little box here. That's actually showing you kind of what your mask looks like. You could see within Photoshop, white is visible, black is hidden when you're working with the mask. If you use the Color Difference Key and you're a fan of masks, this might be helpful to you because it will actually show you what the mask looks like, which can be really helpful if you've got like a lot of little white particles and things like that. So I'm just going to clip this a little bit. Try to get it soft but without having a green edge. It's looking pretty pixelated in there. So it's really just a matter of going through all the different gains and in and out points, because you're really just dealing with color at this point and trying to get a nice smooth line. Now this was the first mascot I had ever keyed and for whatever reason Keylight worked really well with him. Color Difference Key I've had a lot of luck with just people. So you can see here why our garbage mat is important, because that green significantly changes color as it gets away from him. The lighting wasn't terribly consistent, but we know how to get rid of that by using our mask. Are there any other questions about keying so far?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What about like